everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I just want to take a few minutes to talk to you about 4 amazing books that have 2 things in common. First, they are all written for young adults like yourselves, and secondly, they all feature strong female protagonists. Other than those 2 things, these 4 books are very different. We have 4 different genres: contemporary realistic fiction, fantasy, science fiction with some romance, and an autobiography. All 4 of our characters are very different and fit different definitions of what a strong female character can be. And all of our plots are completely different. So hopefully that one of these 4, all of these 4, will pique your interest today. And if they do, just ask me for more questions, or go ahead and grab yourself a copy. So our very first book we want to talk to you about today is called Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell. So if you are a fan of Eleanor and Park, or if you have read Marvel's Runaway comic series, then you have heard of Rainbow Rowell before, and this book, Fangirl by her, is one of my absolute favorites. So Fangirl follows the story of a girl named Kath for short, who is starting her first year of college. Normally, she has her twin sister Ren by her side, her partner in crime, but she ends up having to go off to college, living for the very first time without her sister. Without that push from her sister, Kath really recedes into herself and is very shy. But she ends up making some friends, and they kind of help her come out of her shell. One thing about Kath is that she is a massive, just like the title says, fangirl of Simon Snow, which is like her version of Harry Potter. And the excerpt that I want to read for you today is a conversation between her and her friend Levi about the Simon Snow fan fiction that she's always writing. So it starts off with Levi saying, "That's what you're always working on, right? Writing stories about Simon Snow?" Kath didn't know what to say. It sounded absolutely ridiculous when Levi said it. "They're not just stories," she said. He took a giant bite. His hair was still wet and falling wetly, blondly into his eyes. He pushed it back. "They're not?" Kath shook her head. They were just stories, but stories weren't just anything. Simon wasn't just. "What do you know about Simon Snow?" she asked. He shrugged. "Everybody knows about Simon Snow." "You've read the books?" "I've seen the movies." Kath rolled her eyes so hard it hurt, actually. "So you haven't read the books?" "I'm not really a book person." That might be the most idiotic thing you've ever said to me. So, as you can see, toward the beginning of the book, Kath is really unsure of herself. She's not very confident. She's not owning the thing that she loves, which is Simon Snow. And so one of the great things about this book is that you get to see progression where Kath goes from being really shy, not very confident in herself or her interests, into really becoming what we would consider a strong female protagonist. So if that interests you at all, if you're a fangirl yourself or you like to read contemporary realistic fiction, then Fangirl by Rainbow Rowell is a great book for you. Now, if contemporary realism is not really your thing and you're more of a fantasy girl, then you would love this fantasy book, Graceling by Kristen Cashore. So our main character in Graceling is named Katza, and she fits the mold of what we would expect the typical strong female protagonist to be, which is that she's very physically strong, she's aggressive, and she is a Graceling. In this society that they live in, Gracelings are people that have 2 different colored eyes. Katza has a green one and a blue one, and this marks them with a very special ability. She finds out from a very young age that her grace, her special ability, is that she can kill anybody. So let me read from you from very close to the very beginning of the book, just an excerpt that says a little bit about Katz's lifestyle as this seasoned killer. She practiced every day. She learned her own speed and her own explosive force. She learned the angle, position, and intensity of a killing blow versus a maiming blow. She learned how to disarm a man and how to break his leg, how to twist his arm so severely that he would stop struggling and beg for release. She learned to fight with a sword, with knives and daggers. She was so fast and focused, so creative. She could find a way to beat a man senseless with both arms tied to her sides. Such was her grace. So, as you can see, Katza is a very intense character. She does not allow herself to be vulnerable or emotional. She does not let her friends in. But the course of the book proves that even the strongest characters, the ones who have resigned themselves to a line of killing, can still be strong in their vulnerability. So Katza goes on a journey with another Grace named Poe, and she ends up developing a soft spot for him and learning even more about herself in the process. So if that sounds interesting to you, if you really like fantasy worlds and you like stories about war and fighting, then you would love Graceling by Kristen Cashore. If you are more into romance, then you would love the book The Selection by Kira Cass. The Selection is technically a science fiction book. It takes place in a dystopian society, but there is this overriding theme of romance throughout the entire novel. So The Selection is basically kind of like The Bachelor. There is a society in which the people are broken up by caste systems. So 1 is the highest, and America is in caste 5. And America, of course, is our main character. She lives amongst musicians and artists and actors, things like that. That's what our caste 5 people are. And she finds herself suddenly in the running with 34 other girls to win the heart of the Prince of the Kingdom, Prince Maxon. She isn't particularly excited about this because she feels like it's kind of a pageant, which she does not want to be a part of, and she has a love interest back home. But I want to read to you just a little excerpt about one of the very first times she interacts with the prince. It says, "I was so consumed with my thoughts that I didn't realize I wasn't alone until Prince Maxon spoke. 'Are you all right, my dear?' he asked me. 'I am not your dear.' I looked up to glare at him. There would be no mistaking the disgust in my tone or eyes. 'What have I done to offend you? Did I not just give you the very thing you asked for?' He was genuinely confused by my response. I suppose he expected us to adore him and thank our lucky stars for his existence. I stared him down without any fear, though the effect probably weakened by my tear-stained cheeks. 'Excuse me, dear, are you going to keep on crying?' he asked, sounding very put out by the thought. 'Don't call me that. I am no more dear to you than the 34 other strangers you have here in your cage.' He walked closer. Not seeming at all offended by my loose speech, he just looked thoughtful. It was an interesting expression on his face. So, in case you couldn't tell by that conversation, America is very feisty, she is not afraid to speak her mind, and she's not afraid to let the Prince of the Kingdom know that she does not want him. But I'll give you a little hint. About halfway through the book, that fact starts to shift a little. So if you are interested in The Bachelor, if you're interested in romance, if you're interested in dystopian society, then the book The Selection by Kira Cass is the book for you. Now, maybe none of those books appeal to you. Maybe you are more of a nonfiction reader. And guess what? I have a nonfiction book, an autobiography, with a very strong female lead. The book is called Americanized, Rebel Without a Green Card by Sarah Sadie. Now, Sarah Sadie is a TV writer. She's a young adult writer of some fantasy books that are modern versions of Peter Pan. Those are also very good if that interests you. But one of her most famous and hilarious books is this one, Americanized, Rebel Without a Green Card. So Sarah grew up in America. She knew her family was from Iran, but she had absolutely no idea that they were undocumented immigrants until she was a teenager. And this just goes through her teenage years. She has diary entries, she has pictures, she has so many hilarious anecdotes where she talks about her time navigating being a teenager while also trying to reconcile the fact that she was an undocumented immigrant and trying to become a documented one, get her green card. Now, this book is hilarious. I laughed out loud the entire time I read it. So I just want to read out loud a short excerpt that is just one example of the times that I was laughing so hard. It says, I didn't grow up in a household where the word hate was banned from our vocabulary. My parents were far more offended by the word if it was uttered in English and not in our native Farsi, which they tried to encourage us to speak as much as possible. But regardless of the language it was articulated in, I'm not sure how anyone can survive life as a teen girl without dropping the occasional, or frequent, H-bomb. I felt things deeply, and I needed to express those feelings. For instance, I hated swimming during PE and considered it a basic human right to use my menstrual cycle as an excuse to stay out of the water. My PE teacher was a dude and missed the memo that tampons had been invented and that periods didn't last for 3 consecutive months. I also hated the fact my parents permitted me to rollerblade only if I wore a helmet and knee pads. How was I supposed to look cute and athletic with such oppressive pieces of sporting equipment strapped to my body? Okay, so if that sounded interesting to you, if you like to read about real life and maybe you're interested in the life of this amazing writer and hilarious woman, Sarah Sadie, then you should read Americanized, Rebel Without a Green Card. I just want to thank you all for listening to my book talk today. I hope that you heard about one or maybe more books that appeal to you that you would love to read. Remember, our theme today was strong female protagonists, so I've shown you very different but very strong female main characters. One that has to overcome her circumstances, one who has to be thrown around, doesn't know what to do with her emotions and with love, one who is an actual physical fighter, and one who has to learn how to come out of her shell. So, thank you guys.